Very good. All right, everyone's yes, yep, clear, awesome. Okay, I'm going to put something in the chat box. If you didn't get a chance to download the 9 principles, that's okay. I'll put that in the chat box in just a moment, and I'll also be using that on the slides as well. So that's what today's topic is all about, is going through the 9 principles and explaining them using a couple of examples that some of you had sent in. I had sent you a survey before this, and so I'm taking some of those results and I'm going to apply those as well. So I'm running solo today. I don't have Leslie or Buffy here to help me out with technical problems or any help, so I won't be monitoring the chat so much, but I do want you to put in the chat box any questions that you have as we go along. I'm going to tackle some of those at the end, but this is a 30-minute training, a micro training. So I'm just going to go through things real quick, and then we're going to do what I always call extra innings. For those that can stay longer than 30 minutes, I'll go through each of the questions and answer them as best I can. And then we're going to collect those, and those will also be on the replay. So if you can only stay 30 minutes, that's fine. That's how long the training is scheduled. We'll keep the camera rolling, and I keep answering the questions, and then you'll get that in the replay. So we got a huge mix of people here today. I got folks from my masterclass. That's great to see folks who registered: John and Eva and Cheryl and David and Harry and Dave and Bunny and Nora. Thank you all. Awesome that you're here. I have a lot of folks that are registered that have taken some of my other courses, and looks like Alicia and Stephen and Campbell and Jim and Graham and Pablo. Good to see you. Kristen, Anna, and Katie are here. Awesome. Somebody put Fluffy. I don't know who Fluffy is, but great to see y'all. There's also some new faces, folks that I have not met before. So we're coming from a broad range of experiences. I'm going to show you that with the survey questions right now. So let me just jump to a slideshow here, and we'll just move on ahead. Let me close this. When you registered for this webinar, you were sent to a survey. And I did that for a couple of reasons. For those of you that already know what sideways survey is, that looked really familiar. I've been teaching that. But I'm also going to use it as an example in here of the 9 principles. So I didn't get the final tally. About 68 or 70% of you that registered for the webinar filled out the survey. So here are the results. You also should have got results in your email. And again, I'm doing this because I'm going to show you how this is part of the 9 principles. So when you register for the webinar, there's some questions, and here they were, and here were your answers. When I asked you if your plans for this year will include any of these were the top answers. Almost 87% said they were going to administer a survey to their audience. 81% said they were going to teach a course online, etc. Almost a third said they were hosting their own live event, which was surprisingly high. I didn't expect that. So these are the people in the room now and the things that they think are important for this year. So the examples I'm going to give are going to be focused on surveys and online courses and webinars. That was the point of asking the survey, was to close the loop. The second question was, which of these outcomes have you found difficult to achieve consistently? And here are the results. Number 1 was asking the right questions in the right way to get accurate results from your people. 61% about generating huge attendance, and on and on. You can see all the percentages there, but that was the actual results as of about 90 minutes ago when I pulled this slide up here. So now you can see 24% for increasing customer loyalty. That was lower than I expected. And it was surprising that asking the right questions was the number 1 answer. But these are the troubles that others on this call are having. So you kind of see where you fit compared to your own outcomes that you have found difficult to achieve. And that's what the 9 principles are about, is how to address all of these for your own projects. There's also a question about what would make it totally worth your time to attend today. And I plucked out a couple of sample questions just so you can see what other people are saying. One person said to have recurring income Yes, exactly. When I think of a recurring income, I think of like royalties from my book. I don't have to do anything, just money drops into the checking account. So I'm not going to, we're not going to be talking about how to get recurring income, but using the 9 principles, you're keeping your customers laser focused on you. And that's all about long-term client value. So yes, we'll definitely have an impact on recurring income. One person said to be able to build an audience willing to share feedback with me. That is so spot on. And again, that's what the 9 principles are meant to do. And why I asked you to fill out this survey to try to get that, what we call the survey conversation going. Answer a couple of questions. I'm going to close the loop, share some results, and then ask another question. You'll see how that works as we go along. I'm just checking the waiting room, make sure I got everybody there. The door's open. Somebody else wrote to identify barriers that keep others from taking action. That is just what it's meant to do. In the questions I asked you, I was asking about what was important for you this year, what would make it worth your time to be here, but we can use the same process to identify obstacles to buying. And finally, somebody wrote this. It was a much longer response, but I highlighted the word motivated because this is a word that's rarely used, I see in the digital marketing world. It should be used much more. Motivation is key, and that's what the 9 principles are about. We talk about the psychology and the science behind it. It's how to motivate people, meaning how to get them to take action, to engage with you, to come to your webinars, to stay in your membership groups, to participate in your focus groups. And this person also wrote about, I want them to reach the destination I have for them. And that's so true for all of us. We have things that we've discovered. There's pains that we've gone through. We've gone the hard road, right? And there's things that we've learned, and we don't want others to suffer. We see problems that they have that we can solve. And so we want to guide them down this path to what really works. And how do we keep people to focus on us and listen so that you can best serve them? So I thought those were all great answers. A couple other key phrases I heard in the survey that you filled out when you registered for this webinar: masterminds, workshops. These are some of the key phrases that I heard you use, how you want to apply this. People talked about how to use ads to lead into a webinar. They talked about lead magnets. Somebody said sphere of influence. I just grabbed that phrase. I really like that when talking about bringing people into your orbit. I could talk about the gravitational pull of bringing people into your orbit. Others said they wanted to gain confidence, and they wanted to compare with what they're doing with what others are doing. And that's another point of this short micro training, is to show you what others are doing. All right, so let's jump right into it. Oh, if you have a question, make sure you put a capital Q in there in the chat box. Let me see if I can use the chat box myself. Oh, I guess I can't do a general. Oh, I thought I could send out a general notice, but I can't. Oh, well. But do put a Q in front of it, and then I'll know it's a specific question that you want answered rather than just making a point that you want me to consider. Okay, so in today's training, we're going to keep it short. I'm going to hit some highlights, some applications of this to the 9 principles. But this wheel represents the 9 principles. So every time I talk about that, I'm talking about the why and the what and the when and the who. And so principle 1 is defining the purpose. And again, if you haven't downloaded this, I'll put the link in there. You should have seen that right after the survey, the actual download of the 9 principles. Principle 2 is how to ask the right questions in the right way. Principle 3, etc., around this wheel. So to the extent that you use these principles and apply them to what you're doing, you get all the big benefits from it: higher attendance and engagement and loyalty and more sales, because it's science. It's cause and effect. If you close the loop, that's principle number 5, as you can see here. If you use proper incentives, if you do proper timing, then your engagement with your audience being your clients, your customers, members, employees, students, those things go up. to the extent that you don't use these principles, and this is what I found over now 26 years of gathering data, if you don't define the purpose, if you have like a mushy survey with multiple purposes in it, or you don't ask the right questions the right way at the right time when they should be asked, if you don't do it frequently enough, if you don't close the loop, if you don't give internal incentives, then all these results go down. That's why I call it cause and effect. For all these years, I've been able to look at what people are doing on their surveys and evaluation forms and assessments and quizzes. And I just look at these 9 principles and I say, well, are they using proper timing and frequency? And if not, then I can say with some, well, not some, with a lot of confidence, well, your attendance is going to be low. Your engagement's going to be low. The quality of information that you get from this survey is going to be low. And so there's a lot of confidence I have in what I'm saying here. For those that don't know me, I've been doing this for 28 years now. I've gathered about 7 million data points from 8,000 surveys over that time and collected those from about 550 organizations. And this is what I've done for years and years, is ask a set of questions of a certain organization, gather the data, refine it, modify, ask another survey, gather the data, on and on it goes, 7 million data points later. And this is in organizations you would all know, like FedEx and Nielsen and General Motors and Harley Davidson. A lot of small businesses you wouldn't know, perhaps. A lot of universities, about 240, 250 universities so far, a lot of training companies. And all of this is public knowledge. It's been published in lots of journals and books and book chapters and things, and has been an expensive endeavor, again, doing all this research. But I've had a lot of partners, philanthropic organizations, federal agencies, who had the same question. That's why they've given about $12 million in funding. Their questions were, how do we bring our students in? How do we keep our students enrolled? How do we keep members in our association? How do we get more meaningful results? How do we get more accurate results? How do we keep our customers buying from us again and again? Since they had the same questions as I did, that's where the funding came from. So everything I'm discussing today in terms of the 9 principles is based on all this data collection. It's based on the science behind it. So that's why I like to talk about this. It's not, hey, this worked for me, why don't you try this? It might work for you. This is the science behind it. Also the science, the research collected by my colleagues and everyone that's gone before me as well. So in your download, this is what the 9 principles will look like. So we're going to talk about each of these, the why and the what and the when. And then right below that in your download, you'll see the benefits. So it's important to know that everything I'm talking about today is focused on just 3 outcomes, these 3 right here. So what the principles will lead to is more accurate and meaningful results, better, more interpretable data. And you see this P2, P7, P8, that's of course principle 2, which is asking the right questions in the right way. Principle 7, training your respondents. Principle 8, actionable reporting. So if you uphold these 3 principles, you're going to get more accurate, meaningful results. If you uphold these principles, purpose, and you can see there's a couple that are in here repeatedly. Principle 2 is a little more important than some of the others because it's in here twice. But if you uphold those principles, you'll see an increased participation rate, higher response rate, more robust, deep information from your people, your students and clients and members. And if you uphold these 4 principles, then you'll have more engaged customers, people focused on you, people actually waiting for you to ask another question. And this is one of the great outcomes of asking, using these principles, is people actually are waiting for the survey, which is kind of weird. People asking, hey, when's the next survey? Well, it's because they get so much out of it. Okay, so that's how the principles tie in with the outcomes. And then the results are shown at the bottom of that infographic. When you use the principles, you get all these great benefits, enthusiastic lifetime customers. And that's what I'm all about. If you've my motto is keep your customers forever. That's the name of my podcast. It's not just having satisfied customers, but how do we keep these people forever? I know it's a lofty, impossible goal, but that's what I'm always thinking about. How do I never lose a single person ever, a single student, a single customer or client. And you can see the other results here. You can read those off the infographic as well. So let's use an example here. And what I'm going to do is split my screen if I can do this. I'm going to stop sharing. Whoa, there's giant Matt. Okay. But I am going to see if I can split my screen. So I'm going to show you an example using the survey that you completed just yesterday or this weekend when you registered for the webinar. So let me call up both. I'm going to call up the PDF, and I'm going to call up my slides. I'm going to show these to you together. Okay, here we go. See if we can make this tech work here. I'm going to share my screen again. Again, if you just joined us and have any questions, put those in the Q&A, and I'll answer those during our extra innings. Okay, so I'm going to try to share my screen. There, okay. Why don't you let me know if that works? You should see on the left PowerPoint slide, and on the right the actual principles, so I can go through them one at a time quickly. Okay, great. Good, thanks, James. So let's go through each of these principles. We'll start here at purpose. So this is also, it's on your infographic. And again, the point of today's quick training is just to show you an example of the 9 principles. And then we'll do an extra innings to answer some questions. And then we'll do some follow-up as things that you've heard that you might want to know how they apply to your own specific work. So the 9 principles, the first one is purpose. To get all those benefits, remember the point is to get higher response rates, more accurate data, and more loyal, tuned-in customers. To get those 3 benefits, you have to have a single purpose, not multiple purposes to your survey. And this happens so often that people, especially in big companies, they'll put together every possible question they have and give it to their audience, and then it drives response rate down. The world record was one company I was working with doing a survey, 113 questions. And I couldn't get anyone at that organization to cut that number down. So of course, few people ever filled it out. That's the extreme case. But on the left here, I'm showing you an example of the survey that you filled out for this webinar. Once you registered, you saw me there with my pointy fingers, and I'm pointing at that box and it's saying, please answer these questions. Now that survey had a single purpose. As you notice, when you answered those questions, it was what's going to make this webinar meaningful? What problems are you having right now? But the focus is all about how to make this the best webinar for you, most useful for your time. I didn't ask for demographics. I didn't steer you into asking sales type marketing questions, but that's the error that's made on most surveys, is they have too many purposes. You want to have a single purpose. That's what that's about. Again, with each of these principles, I'm just touching on them because it's we just have 30 minutes of training, but we can talk in more detail over email as well. Principle 2 is precise content, asking the right questions in the right way. This is, of course, a huge topic. I wrote a book called The Survey Playbook. Many of you have read that. That gets into the details of how to ask the right questions in the right way. For our purposes here, I'll just say that, just give some tips. One tip that I guess I better go back to that's the start of my survey that you got. One of my tips is make sure the questions that you ask are relevant, are something that you want to change anyway, or you have the ability to change. So often we ask questions of our audience, and then they'll give us feedback, and then we get the results. We're like, oh wow, that's not really what I wanted to do, or that's not the direction this company's going. When you ask for feedback, just think of it like anything. When somebody asks for your advice, well, I won't point at you, I'll point at me. If somebody asks me for my advice, but then doesn't use it, like that doesn't sit well, does it? You think, well, gee, I thought I was helping this person. You have to think about the same way with your your audience, if you're giving them a survey, whether it's a course evaluation, it's an instructor survey, it's a membership survey, it's an alumni survey, some assessment or quiz, you're essentially asking for their opinion, what's inside their head. But it had better be some answers, when they give answers, that you're able to act on them. You don't ever want to ask somebody questions that you have no intention. This happens all the time on surveys, right? They'll say, where should we have the event next year? And everybody knows it's going to be in, Miami. Like, so why'd you ask me? So it's that kind of approach. So we'll talk more over through email and stuff for folks that are interested in getting down into the content of asking very specific questions in the right way. Principle 3 is about timing and frequency. So for this example, you filled out my survey before the webinar. Isn't that interesting? Most people ask for feedback at the end of the event. When the conference is over, they ask for questions. When the course is over, when the vacation is over. We call that the autopsy approach, right? You wait till the event is over to figure out what went wrong. And there is a place for that, but it shouldn't be the only place. You should be asking questions while it still matters to your people. Always think of that. What's in it for me? What's in it for your audience? So on this example, I asked you questions before the webinar. Then I got the results, and now I can act on it. I'm actually going to be using examples based on what you had to say. And I'm talking about things right now in a priority order based on the feedback you gave in terms of what obstacles you're having. So that's the timing part. Think about when surveys could be applied. I have another example for you in a moment. But also surveys as a conversation. It's an ongoing conversation. I asked you some questions before this webinar, but after this webinar, guess what? You're going to get another survey from me, but it'll be a follow-up question to say, here's 5 things I heard the audience say. Here are some questions that went on in the extra innings. And then I'm sharing that with you and then asking some more questions. So think of your surveys as a conversation, no matter what the application. Participation and ownership is principle 4 based on the feedback I got. That's not important, not an urgent one, but closing the loop is. And you'll notice in closing the loop, that's exactly what I did. I got my screen split here so I can show you on the left side of the screen now. When you, 1 hour before this, you should have got this exact message in your email. And I said, as I promised, here's the results. 86% of you said this and 42% said that. I'm closing the loop. I'm proving to you that your voice was heard. I read those survey results. Obviously, here's the results right here. That's what you have to do for your audience. Whenever you ask them a question, be able to close the loop, share the results back with them. And it becomes like social media. That's one of my examples here. That people love social media because it's ongoing. You write something and somebody likes it and shares it and comments on it. You have to have that same kind of mindset with your surveys and assessments. If you're doing a course evaluation or you're doing an alumni survey, it doesn't matter. You feed some of the results back to the people who filled it out. It doesn't have to be everything. In fact, that would be bad, of course. You don't want to give them all the results, but just some nuggets. What I gave you was probably too much, but it was overkill for this example. But people want to know that their voice was heard, that what they said made a difference, how they compared to others. So now you know, if you're one of these people who speak at a live event, you can say, well, gee, 42% of the people who registered for this webinar are also going to be doing and speaking at live events. So I'm not alone in this room. Principle 7 is internal incentives. And the point of that, as many of you know, is I've done a survey going back to 1999 asking people that do surveys, like, what's the best way of giving, what incentive really works and what incentive never works. And the result, year after year after year, what doesn't work? Money. What doesn't work? Entering their name in some lottery to win some gift. So the people who are experts in giving out surveys say the financial incentives for them was the worst possible incentive. What is the best is what I call individual internal incentives. Why would you fill out my survey? Well, I told you why. I'm going to make this a better webinar for you. I'm going to use examples relevant to you. That's why you would fill it out. And that's why almost 70% of you did. And that, to me, 70% is kind of on the low side. I was expecting, more like 80%. But that's unheard of with surveys, right? But somebody say, I'm going to get 80% of people to fill out a survey. Well, they do if you use the 9 principles. That's the point. If you fail to use those principles, then you get 2% or 5% or 10% or some unrepresentative sample. But when you use the principles, it seems to be getting dark in here. When you use the principles, then you get 60 and 70 and 80% of people to fill it out. That's what people want to know. What's in it for them in terms of their time and in terms of giving them information they can't get anywhere else. Principle, I said, that was principle 6. I said 7. Principle 7 is training the respondents. And this is just one of those things. There's a training that goes on with that as well. But not everyone's good at giving feedback. And we know this. And I give an example of folks that are doing reviews on Amazon. We see some reviews on Amazon and we think, it's not really a really good review. It's 4 stars, but they didn't really explain why. But other people will give great reviews. They'll go through and explain all sorts of aspects, and you can make a decision based on their review. Because some people give really good feedback and others don't. That's just the way it is. So training your respondents, asking the questions in such a way. So let me give you one example of that. One thing you never want to do is ask an open-ended question like this. And we find this all the time at the end of a survey. All the questions are asked, and then the last question is like, any other comments? Any questions? Anything else? You never want to do that. And the reason, one, very few people fill it out. We know this from 7 million data points now. People don't fill that out. But worse yet is people will put irrelevant comments that you can't do anything about. They'll write in the comments, yeah, I'd like to see this happen, or why don't you do more of that, or I don't like how you do this. And as the person who asked the question, you're like, well, I'm not going to change. This is the way I run my course, or this is the way where our systems are set up. And now the person who gave the feedback thinks that you're ignoring them. You're not ignoring them. You just can't put their feedback into play. But you didn't tell them that. So that's the problem. When you say, hey, any other questions? You've opened it up for people to say anything, and now you have to respond to those. So it's a time-consuming process. Instead, you never ask it that open-ended. You would ask a specific purpose. Going back to principle 1, have a specific purpose for the question, and then train them how to ask. Say something like, give one good example of this, or give one bad example of this, or tell me one specific incident where this occurred. You having them focus and giving you a response that you want, not open-ended. That's just a quick example. Actionable reporting. The best example of that is coming up soon, where you'll notice with the survey that you filled out, let me jump back over to that side here, it was used on Typeform. Typeform is the name of the platform, which is good for mobile devices as well as on computers. So actually, I'm jumping ahead of myself here. I'm talking about Principle 9, the delivery mode. I use Typeform because it's best for all sorts of platforms, and we get much higher response rates on that. So if you're interested in the delivery mode, I'm going to share my email address so you can get back a hold of me. We can talk more about that. What I meant to say was Principle 8 for actionable reporting, at-a-glance reporting. We're coming up with some very cool innovations soon. We've just launched it this past month called Sideways Survey Voice. So I'll give you an example of that here in just a moment. So that's the 9 principles applied to what you did today. And we only got a minute or 2. So let me give you 4 quick examples based on what your feedback was. You'll notice earlier I said some of you mentioned evaluating online courses, instructor surveys. Those are things that you are doing. So in these examples where you're asking students, online students perhaps, for their opinion about the course or an instructor, look over here on the right side. Look over here on the right side of the screen. We're going to talk about each one of these principles. But key here is, of course, asking the right questions in the right way, but the timing and the frequency is so key. You do not want to ask questions of your students just at the end of the course. Again, the autopsy approach. You want to be in there a week, maybe 25% through the course to ask students, well, how is this landing for you? Is there any difficulty you're having? Is there anything you want your instructor to explain? We've been doing midterm feedback for colleges and universities, gosh, for probably 16, 17 years now. Hundreds of colleges have used this midterm feedback, asking questions about 1/4 of the way through a course. So the instructor can then say, oh, I see what's going on in here. I thought students were getting this, but they're not. And then being able to close the loop, that's principle number 5, able to close the loop and share with the students, here's what's going on. I thought this was review, but clearly it's new, so let's go over this again. And students are amazed in online courses or in traditional courses that their instructor is gathering feedback, sharing that with them, and then acting on it. Think of all the benefits that draw from this, and they are documented. Higher satisfaction among students. They think the instructor is great. They love the course. All these great benefits come, but it came from asking questions while it still mattered to the students, closing the loop, and then telling them how their feedback was used. A second example, a bunch of attendees today mentioned workshops and sessions and other training events, applying the principles to that. Again, closing the loop, sharing results with them. It might be a quick event though, so you might not have time to do that. So one of the key things here is to make sure there's just a single purpose for each question that you ask. So we did this with a training event. U.S. Department of Energy was doing some solar training, and we used principle 3 of frequent surveys. We asked them a survey at the end of training of day 1, and again at training at day 2 and day 3. Actually, there were 19 training days. We gave a survey 19 times in a row. The response rate at the end was still 95%. So imagine people filling out 19 of your surveys and still 95% of them filling it out. Why would they do it? Because of the principles. Every time they responded, we shared some of the results back with them. And then we asked another question, kept that survey conversation going. So you can do the same thing in workshops and in your training events as well. Closing the loop, doing questions before the event, which is hardly ever done. Ask the right questions before the event starts so you can modify the training to them. Similar to live events, masterminds, one thing I'll add for a live event is we have launched a tool called Sideways Survey Voice, which allows people to speak their feedback. They can go through Amazon Alexa, they can go through Google Assistant, they can also type in the chat feature in Facebook's Facebook Messenger. So imagine asking your people some questions midway through the first day of your mastermind or your conference, your live event. Well, the conferences that I go to, people just, give their responses to their phone, and then our tools automatically calculate the responses and give actionable reports, principle number 8, back to the speaker so that they can close the loop. Such powerful, cool technology that we now have. And curriculum development, somebody had mentioned this. I'm going to save this for the Q&A because we are out of our 30 minutes at this point. So let's just end it there. I'm going to go into extra innings where I'll tackle the curriculum development question. And there was one other question about the reporting. And if you put any questions in the question box, I'll answer those now. But if you can't stay for the extra innings, that's great. Thank you for being here for this micro training. Look in your inbox soon. I'll send you a replay of this broadcast. I'll send you the questions that we answered so you don't miss those. And then, of course, you're going to get a follow-up survey. What else would you get from me but a follow-up survey? But it's trying to keep this conversation going. I shared some results with you, and then I'll share some of the questions that I heard, and then I'll continue to ask you some questions because everyone in this room has some deep wisdom that others could learn from. So by you asking your question and me providing an answer, or you answering questions to yourself that you heard other people saying, it just helps the entire group. We're going to keep that survey conversation going. And of course, you can always email me questions at matt@docchampagne.com. And I'll be happy to not only answer those, but I will also share anonymously those results back with those who are unable to attend. So thank you everyone for attending. We're going into extra innings now, and I'm going to just answer any questions that I see in the Q&A. And let me talk about curriculum development, because that was an unusual request. So I want to give that just a little bit of thought here. The how to use the 9 principles when you're developing curriculum. And when I see that, I think of principle 3, timing and frequency, because it's actually, let me stop sharing here. Go back to Big Matt. When I think of curriculum development, I think of rapid improvement of training materials or course materials. So you want to continue to ask questions of your audience and let them know, closing the loop, principle 5. So I see though principle 3 and principle 5 as 2 of the key ones for curriculum development, being able to ask the right questions and a single purpose, because it's not a whole pile of questions. You're asking perhaps one question, maybe 2. So your question might be about some aspect of the curriculum, some component, want to know if people should know more about this or how best to, I'm just throwing things up. I'm not a curriculum development guy, but you might have a single question about a single purpose. Ask the audience, your subject matter experts or whomever, get the results, close the loop and say, oh, well, this is what we heard. 30% thought this and 20% thought that. Not a very clear-cut answer, so we thought we'd share, this is what they're doing. Or 70% said this, and so this is the direction we're going to go. This seems to be the where most people want to take this. Closing the loop, so important. Then you put the changes into place, demonstrate to them that you did hear their voice, so now they can see how the changes were made. So that's my kind of off-the-cuff answer about the curriculum development issue. Another takeaway I'd like to share as far as asking the right questions in the right way is doing a final review. And this sounds so simple, but it is so rarely done. And that is, once you've set up your questions, like this is what I ask my students or employees or clients or customers, this is the poll that I want to do, is look at it in the eyes of the people filling it out and give it to other members on your team to do. And you might say, well, yeah, Matt, obviously, but so few people actually do that. Look at it from their eyes. And when you look through those same questions, it is amazing what jumps out. You look at question 1 and you think to yourself, oh, it could be choice B or C. Or if I chose choice D, I'm not sure I'd know what they were thinking. And when you go through each question, of course, you identify double-barreled questions and awkward or ambiguous questions, but you also look at the items, the choices themselves, and you'll often find there's something misleading, or could be one thing, could be another. There might be something missing. You say, well, wow, what if somebody could say, this answer, but that's not on the list. So just going back over it as if you were the person filling out is so helpful. I found, even with my own surveys, I'll spot, issues nearly every time. So that's an easy fix to put on your surveys that anybody can do. Have your team do it as well. Another thing to keep in mind is the what's in it for me side of things. So many companies they irritate me, because they, it might be a telecom company, it might be someplace I just ate, it might be a hotel. It doesn't matter, they send me a survey. And the attitude is kind of like, well, you were here, so you need to fill out our survey. And I don't know, to me, it's just irritating. It's like, well, I already paid you some money. It's not like I owe you anything. But that's kind of the attitude that you get on some of these surveys. It's, hey, help us improve our products and services. Take your time to help us improve our products and services. And you think to yourself, well, why would I do that? And often, like, there is no reason. Like, why is this worth my time? So some of you know, I'll tell my audience when I'm doing a survey, I'll be able to say, look, I have nothing to give you that's worth your time. Your time is the most valuable thing you have. You're never going to get it back. Yet I'm asking you to answer 2 questions. So I can't give you your time back, but if you answer these 2 questions, I will share the results with you. I will show you how you compare to others. I will, let you know that your voice was heard, that I did read these, and here were the results. So you give that promise up front, and then of course you deliver on it. You return the results. Then you stand out. That's the amazing thing using the 9 principles, is we all want our voice, we want to get our message out there. We want people to take our courses. We want our customers to buy more of our stuff. We need to get their attention, and it's so hard because everyone's attention is elsewhere. But if you're the person that closes the loop and shares some results with them, you will be noticed. They'll remember this. And then the next time you ask a question, they'll be saying, well, sure, Ken or Vivian, Jean-Louis, or maybe it's Jean-Louis, sorry, Harry. Hey, Bunny. Didn't see you on there before. They'll be saying, hey, Bunny, hey, Ken, I have this question for you. And they'll be like, of course I'm going to answer this. Of course. Because what's in it for me? Well, you already proved it. So that's where I want to be. I mean, that's when I think about keeping your customers forever. People will stick around when you serve those sorts of needs. Of course, you have high quality products and services, and you've got great customer support, like everybody does. But this is just something above and beyond that, to demonstrate to them that their time was really well spent. And that's what people want. And then they'll stay with you. I use this approach in a chiropractor's office. So you're waiting to get an adjustment from the chiropractor, and then there's a question, and people get out their phone and answer the question. And then the staff and the doctors would get the results, and then they would close the loop, and they would go back to the patients at the end of the week and say, it's Feedback Friday or whatever they called it. Here's the top 3 most interesting questions that we heard, and here's the answer from the doctors. And there was the answers, and then they would say, oh, well, we discovered this, that we didn't know that this was causing a problem, or the scheduling, so we fixed it. So the people who took the time to fill out the survey, the patients, are like, well, the doctor just answered my question, didn't even have to wait for it. Here's something else interesting I didn't know, and now they solved this problem. Well, what are they going to do next time you ask a question? They're going to answer it, and they do, over and over and over and over again. They continue to answer your questions, continue to give you useful feedback that you can use to make it a better service for them. And then why would they go anywhere? Like, why would they choose another chiropractor to go to when this chiropractor is addressing not only their physical needs and health needs, but is also letting them know their voice was heard, what they said made a difference? They don't leave. That's the point. They don't leave. And that's what I want for you. I want your people, your students, your members, your clients, your customers to never leave you, to just keep buying what you have next, because you're learning from them through this whole process. By asking the right questions in the right way at the right time, you're building this enormous database of reactions from them, their opinions, what could help them, what obstacles they're facing. And from that, you're building even something better that they could use, addressing more of their concerns. So it's this great relationship that's built, but it's done through proper questioning and being responsive to their answers. And we have the technology today to do this at a mass scale, so that's no longer an issue like it was 20 some years ago when I started, when we had paper and web surveys only. So put all that into place. My voice is about had it here, so I'm going to call it quits here. And I think, let me just double check, see if there's any more questions, and there is not. Thank you for those. I hope, I know that was kind of like a rambling response to a couple of different questions, but I think I covered all that. So thank you for tuning in today. If you're watching this on replay, that's the end of the extra innings. But I will follow up with a survey, ask another couple of questions, and I'll continue to close the loop and share results I hear from others, because we just have some incredible people that not only attending here, people watching the replay from all sorts of companies, from huge Fortune 500 companies and small businesses. We've got plenty of people here from higher education, from training organizations, federal agencies are represented here. So just a lot of wisdom among the attendees. And so let's just continue to share that. We're all after the same mission: how to keep our customers forever, how to get useful, accurate information from them, how to get high participation rates. We all have the same goals. And I'd like to build or rebuild. I had it at one time. I like to rebuild a community of experts, folks that want to build an audience in this way that we can learn from each other. So you'll be hearing more about that on email as well. So that's it for today. I'll send out the replay soon. Write me at matt@docchampagne.com if any questions. And everybody have an awesome rest of your morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you are in the world. We'll see you next time.